After I became a millionaire, I started noticing the silence. Not the kind you fill with music or conversation. The kind that lives in the space between words. The pause before someone says what they really mean. I noticed it first on a Tuesday morning in my penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, the water gray and restless beneath an October sky. I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows with a cup of coffee that had gone cold in my hands, watching the city wake up below me, when my phone buzzed. A text from Caroline. Just 3 words. We need to talk. I stared at those words longer than I should have. Caroline had been my best friend since we were 23, sharing a studio apartment in Wicker Park with secondhand furniture and dreams too big for the space we occupied. That was 15 years ago. 15 years of late nights and early mornings, of holding each other through breakups and job losses, of celebrating every small victory like it was the only thing that mattered. She knew me before the money, before the luxury, before I became the woman who could buy silence but couldn't escape it. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Like this video so this story reaches more hearts. And subscribe for the next journeys. The apartment smelled like imported orchids and expensive candles, vanilla and amber, a scent I'd chosen because the boutique owner said it was what wealthy women preferred. I wasn't sure I even liked it. I wasn't sure about a lot of things anymore. The marble countertops were pristine, the Italian leather sofa positioned perfectly against the exposed brick wall, everything curated to tell a story of success. But whose story was it? Some days I walked through these rooms and felt like a guest in my own life. Caroline's text sat on my screen like an accusation. We need to talk. When had we stopped just talking? When had everything become so carefully scheduled, so formally announced? I remembered a time when she would simply show up at my door with wine and takeout, when we didn't need a reason to exist in each other's presence. Now there were calendars to coordinate, assistants to notify, security to clear. The money had come suddenly, a tech startup I'd poured my soul into for 7 years, coding until my eyes burned, surviving on coffee and conviction. When the acquisition happened, when the numbers appeared in my account with more zeros than I could process, I'd called Caroline first. Before my parents, before anyone. I'd driven to her apartment in Lincoln Park, the same modest 1-bedroom she'd lived in for 5 years, and we'd sat on her balcony crying and laughing until the sun came up. Nothing has to change, I'd told her. We're still us. But something had changed. I felt it in the way she looked at my new address, the way her smile tightened when I offered to pay for dinner, the way she'd started saying "your world" as if we no longer inhabited the same one. There was a distance I couldn't name, a wound I couldn't see to heal. I texted back, "Of course. Tonight? My place?" The response came instantly. Actually, I'd rather meet somewhere neutral. Café Montrose, 7 o'clock. Neutral. The word lodged itself in my chest like a splinter. Since when did Caroline and I need neutral territory? I set the phone down and returned to the window, watching the morning light cut through the buildings, turning glass into gold. A yacht moved slowly across the lake, leaving a white wake that dissolved into nothing. I thought about all the things money had given me: security, freedom, options I'd never imagined possible. But I also thought about what it had taken: the ease, the certainty, the feeling that someone knew me completely and loved me anyway. Caroline had been the person I called when I couldn't sleep, when the weight of decisions pressed too heavily on my shoulders, when I needed to remember who I was before all of this. She'd seen me at my worst: unwashed hair, crying on bathroom floors, doubting everything about myself. She'd believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. "You're going to do something extraordinary," she'd said once, when we were 25 and broke and terrified of our futures. I can feel it. And now, she needed neutral ground. I turned away from the window, my reflection catching in the glass. A woman in silk pajamas that cost more than a month's rent used to, standing in a home that resembled a magazine spread more than a life. Behind me, the apartment stretched out in elegant emptiness. The dining table that seated 12, but had never hosted a dinner party. The library filled with leather-bound books I'd bought for their spines. The guest rooms that remained perpetually vacant. I'd built a palace, but somehow I'd forgotten to fill it with anything real. The coffee in my hand had gone completely cold. I walked to the kitchen, all white marble and brass fixtures, and poured it down the sink, watching the dark liquid swirl and disappear. There was something Caroline wanted to tell me, something that required distance and formality, something that had been building in the silences between us. I thought I knew what it was. I thought I understood the shape of the truth waiting for me. But I was wrong. I had no idea that by the end of that evening, I would finally understand what my wealth had really cost me, and it had nothing to do with money at all. The day passed in a fog of meetings I barely remembered, and emails I answered on autopilot. My assistant, Grace, brought lunch from that new French place on Rush Street. Seared salmon with microgreens and edible flowers, arranged like art on bone china. I ate 3 bites and pushed it away. Everything tasted like paper. By 6:30, I was standing in my walk-in closet, a room larger than the entire studio Caroline and I once shared, staring at rows of clothing I'd accumulated like armor. Cashmere sweaters in colors that whispered wealth. Silk blouses that cost more than our old monthly rent. Designer jeans that somehow made me feel both powerful and like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. I reached for the simplest thing I could find. Black pants, a cream sweater, the leather jacket I'd owned since before everything changed, the one with the worn cuffs and the broken zipper I'd never bothered to fix. I wanted to look like myself. I wasn't sure I remembered who that was. The drive to Café Montrose took 15 minutes through early evening traffic. The city lit up against the darkening sky. I'd offered to send a car for Caroline. She'd declined. Of course she had. I parked a block away, choosing to walk, needing the cold air to clear my head. October in Chicago always felt like the city was preparing for something. The last breath before winter, the final moment of color before everything went gray. The cafe sat on a quiet corner in Andersonville, the kind of place we used to frequent when we were younger. Mismatched furniture, local art on exposed brick walls, the smell of coffee and fresh pastries, soft indie music playing from speakers that crackled occasionally. It was warm and worn and real. I realized with a sharp pang that I hadn't been anywhere like this in months. My life had become a series of polished surfaces and hushed elegance. Restaurants where they knew my name and preferences, where the menus had no prices, and the silence was always perfect. Caroline was already there, sitting at a corner table by the window. She looked up when I entered, and something passed across her face. Something I couldn't quite name. She'd cut her hair shorter since I'd last seen her. When had that been? 3 weeks ago? 4? Time had started moving strangely, measured in board meetings and quarterly reports rather than coffee dates and spontaneous lunches. "Hey," I said, sliding into the chair across from her. The table wobbled slightly. I loved it. "Hey." Her smile was tight, careful. She had a mug of tea in front of her, Earl Grey by the smell, the same thing she'd been drinking since college. Some things hadn't changed. That felt both comforting and devastating. The barista came over, a young woman with pink hair and kind eyes, and I ordered a cappuccino. Caroline and I sat in silence until it arrived, the foam art a perfect leaf, the ceramic warm against my palms. The silence between us felt heavy, filled with all the things we weren't saying. "You look good," I offered. She did. Caroline had always had this effortless beauty, the kind that came from not thinking about it too much. Dark hair, sharp cheekbones, eyes that saw everything. Tonight, she wore jeans and an oversized cardigan, simple silver hoops in her ears. She looked comfortable in her skin in a way I envied. "Thanks. So do you." But her eyes said something else. They said, "You look expensive." I wrapped my hands around the mug and waited. This was her meeting, her neutral ground. Whatever she needed to say, I would make space for it. Caroline took a breath, set down her tea, and looked directly at me. I've been trying to figure out how to say this for months. My heart stuttered. "Okay. I don't think I can do this anymore." Her voice was quiet but steady. "Our friendship, not like this." The words landed like stones. I felt my throat tighten, my chest constrict. "What do you mean?" She looked away, out the window where people passed by in coats and scarves, living their ordinary lives. "I mean that every time I see you now, I feel like I'm talking to a stranger. You live in a different world, Natasha, and I'm happy for you, I am. But I don't fit into that world, and I'm tired of pretending that's not true." "You fit," I said immediately, desperately. "Caroline, you're my best friend. Nothing about that has changed. Everything has changed." Her eyes met mine again, and I saw something there that frightened me. A resignation, a decision already made. "You just haven't noticed." I wanted to argue, to list all the ways we were still the same, but the words caught in my throat because part of me knew she was right. Part of me had felt the shift too, had seen the way our conversations had become more careful, more curated, emptied of the raw honesty that used to define us. "Tell me," I said finally. "Tell me what I haven't noticed." Caroline's jaw tightened. She looked down at her tea and I saw her fingers trembling slightly against the mug. Whatever she was holding back, it was costing her something to keep it inside. "Not yet," she said softly. "I'm not ready yet." And there it was again. That silence, that space between words where the real truth lived, waiting. We sat there as the cafe hummed around us. Two women who'd once known each other's thoughts before they were spoken, now struggling to find any words at all. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting everything in amber and shadow. I thought about the penthouse waiting for me across the city, all that empty elegance, and suddenly I wanted nothing more than to be 23 again, broke and dreaming, sitting on Caroline's balcony watching the sun rise on a future we thought we'd face together. But we couldn't go back. We could only go forward into whatever truth she wasn't ready to tell me. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my king-size bed with its 1,000 thread-count sheets and watched the city lights paint patterns across my ceiling, replaying every moment of our conversation, searching for clues in the spaces between Caroline's words. "I don't think I can do this anymore." The sentence circled through my mind like a bird trapped in a room, beating its wings against glass. At 3 a.m, I got up and walked through the penthouse in bare feet, the marble cold against my skin. I found myself in the 3rd bedroom, the one I'd vaguely designated as a guest room, but had never actually prepared for guests. There was a box in the closet, cardboard and dust-covered, something I'd moved from apartment to apartment but never unpacked. I pulled it down and carried it to the living room, settling on the floor beneath the massive windows overlooking the lake. Inside were relics from another life. Photographs from college, ticket stubs from concerts we'd attended, a birthday card Caroline had made me when we were 25, with a terrible drawing of the two of us as superheroes. Dynamic duo, she'd written in silver marker. Unstoppable. Forever. I traced the words with my finger, feeling something crack open in my chest. There was a photo near the bottom that made me pause. The two of us at Navy Pier, maybe 8 years ago, both of us windblown and laughing, our arms around each other's shoulders. We looked so young, so certain. I remembered that day, We'd gone to celebrate Caroline getting promoted to senior editor at the magazine where she worked. We'd ridden the Ferris wheel 3 times, eaten too much deep dish pizza, stayed out until the city lights reflected like stars in the water. I looked at that photo and tried to pinpoint exactly when things had shifted. Was it the day I'd told her about the acquisition? Was it when I'd moved into this place? Or had it been more gradual? An erosion so slow I hadn't noticed the ground disappearing beneath our friendship until the foundation was already gone. The truth was, I'd been so focused on managing my new reality, the lawyers, the investments, the endless decisions about money I'd never imagined having, that I'd stopped paying attention to the one thing that had always mattered most. I'd assumed Caroline would always be there, that our friendship was solid enough to withstand any change. I'd taken her for granted in the way you take sunlight for granted, not realizing it's a gift until you're standing in darkness. By morning, I'd made a decision. I texted her. "Can we try again? Lunch tomorrow? Anywhere you want." Her response came an hour later. "There's something I need to show you first. Can you come to my apartment tonight?" I arrived at 7, carrying wine and the kind of expensive takeout that I immediately regretted, sushi from that place that required reservations weeks in advance. Caroline opened the door in leggings and an old Northwestern sweatshirt, her face bare of makeup, and I suddenly felt ridiculous standing there with my designer handbag and my carefully curated offering. "Come in," she said, and her voice carried something I couldn't identify. Nervousness? Determination? Both? Her apartment looked exactly as I remembered. The worn couch we'd found at a thrift store, the bookshelf overflowing with novels and poetry, the small kitchen with its chipped countertops, and the coffee maker that had been temperamental since she'd bought it. It smelled like jasmine tea and old books, and home in a way my penthouse never had. I felt a wave of something that might have been grief. We settled on the couch with the sushi between us, though neither of us ate. Caroline poured the wine with shaking hands, and I realized with a start that she was scared. Caroline, who'd always been the brave one, the one who spoke truth even when it cost her something, was afraid of whatever she was about to say. "I need to show you something," she said finally, reaching for her laptop on the coffee table. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, and then she turned the screen toward me. It was a blog. The header read, "Living in Someone Else's Shadow. Chronicles of Almost." I looked at Caroline, confused. "What is this?" "It's mine. I started it 6 months ago." She took a sip of wine, her eyes not meeting mine. "I've been writing about us, about what it's like to watch your best friend become wildly successful while you stay exactly where you are." My stomach dropped. I began scrolling, my eyes catching on titles. "When Your Best Friend Becomes Unreachable. The Price of Proximity to Wealth. How to Celebrate Someone's Success When It Highlights Your Failure." The posts were raw, vulnerable, brutally honest. They were about feeling left behind, about smiling through dinners I insisted on paying for while dying inside, about the way my success had made her question every choice in her own life, about envy, about inadequacy, about loving someone and resenting them simultaneously. "Caroline," I breathed, but I didn't know what to say. The words on the screen blurred as tears filled my eyes. "I'm not proud of these feelings," she said quietly, "but they're real. And I realized I've been lying to you for months, smiling when I wanted to scream, pretending I was fine when I was falling apart. You kept asking if things were okay, and I kept saying yes because I was ashamed. Because you'd done nothing wrong except succeed, and what kind of person resents their best friend for that?" I scrolled further, my heart breaking with each post. She'd documented every moment I'd been blind to, the times I'd talked about my problems that were really just the privilege of having choices, the way I'd started picking restaurants without asking about price, The casual mentions of vacations and purchases that represented more money than she made in months. Why didn't you tell me? My voice came out as a whisper. Because I didn't know how. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were wet. How do you tell your best friend that their dream coming true feels like your nightmare? How do you say that every time you succeed, I feel like I'm failing? That's not your fault, Natasha. That's my insecurity, my inadequacy, my inability to be happy for you without it destroying me. I set the laptop aside and reached for her hand, but she pulled back. There's more, she said. That's not even the worst part. My throat closed. What do you mean? She took a shaking breath, and I saw her gathering courage for something bigger, something she still wasn't ready to say completely. I've been comparing everything about my life to yours, my apartment to your penthouse, my salary to your wealth, my ordinary life to your extraordinary one. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being able to see any value in what I have, because all I could see was what you had that I didn't. Her voice cracked. I let your success make me feel worthless. And the thing is, I blamed you for that. I've been blaming you. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and painful, and finally honest. But there's something else, she continued, her voice dropping. Something I've been too ashamed to admit, even in the blog. Something that's been eating me alive. She stopped, her jaw working, tears sliding down her face. I'm not ready to tell you yet, she whispered. But soon, I promise. Soon. And once again, I was left standing at the edge of a truth I couldn't quite see, knowing only that whatever Caroline was hiding, it was bigger than envy, deeper than resentment, more complicated than anything I'd imagined. 3 days passed in excruciating slow motion. Caroline texted once. I need some time. Please. I wanted to respect that, wanted to give her space. But the not knowing was destroying me. I read through her blog posts over and over, searching for clues to the larger truth she was still holding back. The entries were painful enough on their own, each one a mirror showing me the friend I'd failed to see, the ways I'd been blind and careless and absorbed in my own transformation. But underneath every post, I sensed something darker, something she'd been careful not to write about even in her most vulnerable moments. I threw myself into work, taking meetings I didn't need to take, reviewing contracts that didn't require my attention. My business partner, Marcus, finally pulled me aside on Thursday afternoon. What's going on with you? You've been somewhere else all week. Just personal stuff, I said, which was both true and entirely inadequate. He studied me for a moment. The money changed you, you know. Not in bad ways. You're still you. But it's like you got louder somehow. More present. Like you finally believed you deserved to take up space. He paused. Some people struggle with that. Watching someone step into their power when they're still trying to find their own. His words stayed with me as I drove home through late afternoon traffic. The sky threatening rain, the city feeling heavy and gray. Was that what had happened? Had my newfound confidence, my willingness to finally believe in my own worth, somehow diminished Caroline's sense of hers? The thought made me sick. That evening, she called. No text warning, just my phone lighting up with her name, and I answered so fast I nearly dropped it. Can you meet me? Her voice sounded hollow. Lincoln Park, our bench. I knew exactly which bench she meant. 20 minutes later, I was walking through the park as the first drops of rain began to fall. The bench sat near the pond, partially hidden by old oak trees, the same place we'd spent countless afternoons in our 20s, dreaming, planning, believing the world was ours for the taking. Caroline was already there, sitting with her arms wrapped around herself despite the cold. I sat down beside her, and for a long moment, We just watched the rain dimple the surface of the pond. "I quit my job today," she said finally. I turned to her, shocked. "What? Why?" "Because I couldn't stand it anymore. Watching everyone congratulate you, ask about you, use you as the example of what success looks like." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Do you know how many times in the last year someone has said to me, 'It must be amazing having such a successful best friend,' as if your success is the most interesting thing about me, as if I'm just a satellite orbiting your sun." "Caroline, let me finish." She finally looked at me, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. "I quit because I was starting to hate you, really hate you, and I knew if I stayed, if I kept watching you climb higher while I stayed stuck, I would destroy us both." The rain was falling harder now, soaking through my jacket, but neither of us moved. "I told myself it was about the money," she continued, "about you having things I didn't have, but that was a lie. The truth is so much uglier than that." My heart was pounding. "Tell me." She laughed, a broken sound. "You remember David?" David. Her ex-boyfriend from 3 years ago. The one she'd been devastated over when he'd ended things. The one I'd helped her get through, holding her through countless nights of tears and rage and grief. Of course I remember. He reached out to me 2 months ago, said he wanted to catch up, that he'd been thinking about me, that ending things had been a mistake. Her hands were shaking. We met for coffee. And do you know what he spent the entire time talking about? I felt cold dread spreading through my chest. You. The word came out bitter. Your success, your company, your money. He asked if you were single. He asked if I could introduce him. He said, her voice broke. He said he'd always thought you were attractive, but you'd seemed so focused on work back then. But now that you were successful, established, he found you fascinating. Caroline, I would never... I know. She turned to me, anguish written across her face. I know you wouldn't. That's not the point. The point is that he looked at you and saw someone worth pursuing, and he looked at me and saw a bridge to get to you. The point is that the man I loved, the man who broke my heart, came back into my life not for me, but because my best friend had become someone worth knowing. The rain was streaming down both our faces now, mixing with tears, and I reached for her, but she stood up, stepping back. And that's when I realized, she said, her voice rising. It's not about the money. It's not even about success. It's about the fact that you've become the kind of person people notice, people want, people respect. And I'm still exactly who I was. Invisible. Forgettable. The sidekick in your story. That's not true. Isn't it? She laughed again, that terrible broken sound. Be honest, Natasha. When was the last time we talked about my life, my dreams, my problems? When was the last time you asked me about anything that didn't revolve around whether I was okay with your success? I opened my mouth to answer and realized with horror that I couldn't remember. Every conversation over the past year had been about me, my company, my decisions, my new life. I'd been so consumed with navigating my transformation that I'd stopped seeing her as a whole person with her own story. I don't know how to be your friend anymore, Caroline said quietly, the fight draining out of her. Because every time I'm with you, I feel myself shrinking, getting smaller, disappearing. And I hate myself for it, but I hate you for it too. She wrapped her arms around herself again, and I saw her for what she was. Not the strong, confident woman I'd always known, but someone who'd been slowly breaking apart while I'd been too blind to see. There's one more thing, she whispered. The real reason I needed to talk to you. The thing I couldn't write in the blog because it would make everything real. The rain fell harder, and the world seemed to narrow to just the two of us standing in the storm. I had a chance, she said. 6 months ago. A publisher wanted me to write a book. My own book. About my experiences as an editor. About the literary world. About finding meaning in art. It was everything I'd ever wanted. That's amazing. I turned it down. Her voice was barely audible. I turned it down because in the proposal, I'd mentioned you. Our friendship. Your success story as a contrast to my quieter life. And when the publisher got excited about that angle, when they wanted to make you a bigger part of the narrative, I couldn't do it. I couldn't write my own story if it meant living in your shadow even on the page. She looked at me with devastation in her eyes. I sacrificed my dream because I couldn't bear to have it connected to yours. And I've been blaming you for that ever since, even though you didn't even know. Even though the only person who destroyed my opportunity was me. The words hung between us in the rain, and I understood finally the depth of what my success had cost her. Not just envy or inadequacy, but her own dreams, abandoned out of pride and pain, and the fear of being forever defined by her proximity to me. We stood there in the storm, 2 women who'd started together and somehow ended up on opposite sides of an invisible divide, and I had no idea how to cross back to her. All I knew was that everything I'd thought I understood about our friendship, about success, about what it meant to have it all, was wrong. We didn't speak for a week. The silence was different this time. Not the careful, curated distance we'd been maintaining, but something raw and honest and necessary. I spent those days confronting truths I'd been avoiding, sitting with the discomfort of seeing myself through Caroline's eyes. I read her blog again, every post, but this time I didn't read it as someone wounded by her words. I read it as someone trying to understand a pain I'd never had to feel. What would it be like to watch your best friend's life explode into something magnificent while yours stayed exactly the same? To have your own accomplishments. And Caroline had many. She was brilliant at her work, eclipsed by the sheer magnitude of someone else's success. To be asked about your famous friend before anyone asked about you. I'd been so focused on proving that money hadn't changed me that I'd failed to see how it had changed everything around me. The power dynamics, the assumptions, the way people looked at me differently and, by extension, looked at her differently too. I'd become the main character in a story where she'd once been an equal, and I'd never asked her permission for that rewriting. On the 8th day, I called her. I need to tell you something. Can I come over? She hesitated. Okay. Her apartment felt different when I arrived that evening. Or maybe I was different. Finally seeing it not as something smaller than my life, but as something truer. She'd been painting. There were canvases leaning against the walls, splashes of color I'd never known she was creating. Since when do you paint? I asked, touching the edge of one canvas, an abstract piece in blues and grays that felt like sadness and beauty mixed together. Since I quit. Turns out I have time for things now. Her voice wasn't hostile, just tired. We sat on her couch, the same positions as before, but the air between us felt different. Clearer, maybe, or just more honest. I've been thinking about what you said, I began, about how I stopped asking about your life. You were right, and I want to tell you why, even though it's not an excuse. She waited, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. I was terrified, I said. When the money came, when everything changed so fast, I felt like I was drowning. Every decision had massive consequences. Every choice could be the wrong one. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. convinced I was going to lose it all, that I'd somehow made a mistake and would end up back where I started but worse, because now I'd know what I'd lost. I took a breath. And you were the only thing that felt stable. The only thing that felt like it couldn't change. So I leaned on you without even realizing it. I talked about my problems because you were my safe place, And I never stopped to think that by making you my anchor, I was drowning you too. Caroline's eyes glistened. I should have told you. I should have been honest instead of letting it fester. You tried. I wasn't listening. I thought about all the times she gently tried to redirect conversations, all the moments I'd bulldozed past her subtle hints because I was too absorbed in my own crisis. I took you for granted because you'd always been there. I forgot that friendship is something you have to tend, not something that just exists because it always has. I forgot that too, she said quietly. I forgot that your success wasn't happening to me, that it wasn't about me. I made everything about how it affected me instead of just being happy for you. We sat in that truth for a moment, both of us culpable, both of us wounded, both of us trying to find our way back to each other. The book deal, I said. Why didn't you tell me? She looked away. Because I was ashamed. Because turning it down was stupid and self-destructive, and I knew you'd try to fix it. You'd probably offer to call the publisher or help me write a different proposal or try to save you, I finished. Like I always do. Like you always do, she echoed, and I needed to figure out how to save myself. The words settled between us, and I understood something I'd been missing. Caroline didn't need me to fix this. She needed me to witness it, to acknowledge the pain without trying to make it disappear with money or connections or solutions. I'm sorry, I said, for not seeing you, for making our friendship about me, for being so consumed with my own transformation that I forgot you were going through your own. I'm sorry too, she said, for blaming you for my choices, for letting envy poison something beautiful, for not being brave enough to tell you the truth when it might have mattered. She set down her tea and turned to face me fully. But there's something else I need to say. Something I haven't been able to admit, even to myself. My heart stuttered. Here it was, the final piece, the truth she'd been circling around. The real reason I've been so angry, she said slowly, isn't because you succeeded and I didn't. It's because part of me believed that if you succeeded, I would too. Like we were a package deal. Like the universe owed me something because I'd been there for you, supported you, believed in you when you were just starting out. Her voice cracked. I felt entitled to your success. Not the money. I never wanted your money. But the validation. The feeling of mattering. And when your success came and my life stayed exactly the same, I felt betrayed. By you. By fate. By everything. As if you'd broken some cosmic promise. She wiped at her eyes. And that's so ugly, Natasha. That's so unfair to you. You don't owe me anything just because we're friends. Your success isn't something I get partial credit for. But I've been acting like it is, keeping score, tallying up everything I gave you against everything you have now, like friendship is a transaction that should pay dividends. The honesty in her words was brutal and brave, and I loved her for it, even as it hurt. I built my identity around being your friend, she continued, the successful one's loyal companion, and I didn't even realize I was doing it until you actually became successful and I had nothing left, no story of my own. Just this borrowed shine that made me feel important. She looked at me with such raw vulnerability that it took my breath away. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by you. And I don't think I can do that if we stay as close as we were. Not right now. The words hurt, but I understood them. What does that mean? It means I need space to build something that's mine. To figure out what I want when I'm not measuring it against what you have. To learn how to be happy for you without it destroying me. But we'll still be friends? My voice came out small, frightened. I hope so. She reached across and took my hand. But different. Healthier. With boundaries I should have set a long time ago. I squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of everything we'd said, everything we'd finally acknowledged. It wasn't the ending I'd wanted, but it was honest. It was real. And maybe that was more important than comfortable. I want you to know something, I said. Everything I have, the money, the success, all of it, feels hollow when I think about losing you. You're not the sidekick in my story, Caroline. You're the reason I had the courage to write it in the first place. She smiled, sad and genuine. I know. I'm just starting to believe it. We sat together in her small apartment as evening turned to night. Two women trying to rebuild a friendship that had nearly collapsed under the weight of unspoken truths. The path forward wasn't clear, but at least now we could see it. At least now we were finally, honestly looking. 2 months passed. Caroline and I kept our distance, but it was a different kind of distance. Intentional rather than painful, necessary rather than punishing. She texted occasionally with updates. She'd started painting seriously, had reached out to the publisher about reconsidering the book, was seeing a therapist to work through what she called the entitlement issue. I gave her space but let her know I was there, that the door was always open, that our friendship wasn't over, just evolving. I changed too. I started noticing the ways I'd let wealth create walls around me, the habits I'd developed that pushed people away, even as I claimed to want connection. I hired fewer cars and walked more. I ate at normal restaurants where the servers didn't know my name. I called my parents more, visited my sister in Wisconsin, reconnected with people I'd lost touch with during my single-minded climb to success. And slowly, carefully, I began building a life that felt less like a museum and more like a home. It was December when Caroline texted, "Can we meet? I have something to show you." We met at the Art Institute on a gray Wednesday afternoon, the museum quiet between the morning crowds and the after-work rush. Caroline was waiting by the entrance in a long wool coat, her hair pulled back, looking more like herself than she had in over a year, settled somehow, in her own skin. "Hey," she said, and her smile reached her eyes. "Hey." We walked through the galleries in comfortable near silence, past Monets and Hoppers and pieces we'd seen together 100 times before. Finally, she led me to a bench in front of a painting I'd never paid much attention to. A simple landscape, a field stretching toward distant mountains under an enormous sky. "I've been thinking about what you said," Caroline began, not looking at me but at the painting. "About me being the reason you had courage. And I've been thinking about all the ways I diminished myself by tying my worth to yours." She turned to me then. "But I've also been thinking about something else. Something I haven't said because I was too buried in resentment to see it." My heart quickened. "The truth is, watching you succeed, watching you become this powerful, confident version of yourself, it terrified me. Not because I was jealous, or not just because of that. It terrified me because it meant I had no more excuses." I frowned, not understanding. "You were my proof," she explained. "My evidence that staying small was smart, that playing it safe was wise. As long as you were struggling too, I could tell myself that big dreams were risky, that ambition was dangerous, that staying comfortable was enough." She paused. "But then you stopped playing it safe. You bet everything on yourself and you won. And suddenly I had to face the fact that I'd been hiding, using caution as camouflage for fear." She looked back at the painting. "Your success held up a mirror, and I hated what I saw. Not you, me. The way I'd been making myself smaller my entire life, convincing myself it was humility when it was really just cowardice." "Caroline, let me finish." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I blamed you for making me feel inadequate. But the truth is, you inspired me. You showed me what was possible. And that was unbearable, because it meant I had to choose, either keep shrinking, keep playing small, keep blaming external circumstances for my unhappiness, or step up. Take risks. Bet on myself the way you'd bet on yourself. She pulled out her phone and showed me the screen. It was an email from the publisher, dated 3 days ago. We're thrilled to move forward with your memoir. Your revised proposal, focusing on finding your voice in the shadow of comparison and building an authentic life in an age of performance, is exactly what we've been looking for. We'd love to discuss next steps. I looked at her, stunned. Caroline. I rewrote the entire proposal, made it about my journey, not yours, about learning to stop measuring my worth against other people's achievements, about the year I spent hating my best friend and what it taught me about myself. She smiled. Turns out my story was interesting enough on its own. I just had to believe it was. I felt tears burning in my eyes. I'm so proud of you. I know. And for the first time, I can accept that without it making me feel small. She took my hand. I needed to fall apart to rebuild myself. And I'm sorry I dragged you through that. But I'm not sorry it happened. I needed it. We sat there in front of the painting, and I felt something shift. Not back to how it was, but forward into something new. Something stronger because it had been tested and chosen rather than just inherited from our younger selves. There's one more thing, Caroline said, and I heard a tremor in her voice. The biggest thing. The thing I've been working up the courage to say for weeks. I waited, my pulse loud in my ears. She took a deep breath. All this time, while I was drowning in envy and resentment, there was something underneath that I couldn't see. Something that was driving everything. What? Her eyes met mine, and they were filled with something that looked like relief and fear and love all mixed together. I was terrified you'd outgrow me, that you'd become this incredible person and realize I was ordinary, that you'd wake up one day and wonder why you were still friends with someone who hadn't changed, hadn't grown, hadn't become anything special. Her voice broke. I was so scared of losing you that I started pushing you away first. Self-destruction as self-protection. She gripped my hand tighter. But here's what I finally understood. You never made me feel ordinary. I did that to myself. You never asked me to be anything other than who I was. I was the one who decided that wasn't enough. And all my anger, all my resentment, all my pain, it was me punishing you for a judgment you never made. A tear slid down her cheek. The truth is, Natasha, you've been nothing but loving and generous and loyal. You've been exactly the friend you always were. I'm the one who changed. I'm the one who let fear turn me bitter. And I'm so sorry for making you carry the weight of my insecurity. I was crying now, too, understanding finally what she'd been carrying all this time. Not just envy, but the terror of abandonment, the fear that success creates chasms too wide to cross. I never wanted to leave you behind, I whispered. I never even thought about it. I know that now. She smiled through her tears. But I had to learn to believe I was worth keeping around, not because I'd always been there, but because of who I actually am. And I couldn't learn that while I was still defining myself through you. She pulled something from her bag, a small wrapped package. I wanted to give you this. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a painting, one of hers, small enough to hold in my hands. It showed 2 women sitting on a bench by water, their faces turned toward each other, the space between them both vast and intimate. It's us, she said. Not who we were, and not who we're trying to be. Just who we are right now, separate but connected, different but choosing each other anyway. I looked at the painting and saw what she meant. The women in it weren't merged together, weren't mirrors of each other. They were distinct, individual, whole on their own. But the way they leaned toward each other, the way the light fell between them, it spoke of love, of choice, of a bond that had survived precisely because it had been tested. "It's perfect," I said. "We're going to be okay," Caroline said, and it wasn't a question. Different, maybe, but okay. I pulled her into a hug, and we held each other in that quiet gallery, two women who'd nearly lost each other to silence and fear and unspoken truths. We were rebuilding from broken pieces, but that's what made it real. That's what made it strong. "There's still one thing I need to tell you," Caroline whispered against my shoulder. "The final thing. The thing I really thought about you through all of this." I pulled back to look at her, my heart in my throat. "What is it?" She smiled, soft and true and finally free. "Tomorrow. I'll tell you tomorrow. At our bench. I promise." And this time, I believed her. I arrived at Lincoln Park the next morning, just as the sun was breaking through the winter clouds, casting everything in pale gold light. The bench was covered in frost, the pond beside it still and silver. Caroline was already there, 2 coffee cups in her hands, the cheap kind from the corner bodega we used to frequent, not the artisanal pour-overs I'd gotten used to. Something about that detail made me want to cry. "I got your usual," she said as I sat down. 2 sugars, extra cream, the way you actually like it, not the way you pretend to like it in fancy coffee shops. I took the cup, wrapping my cold hands around it, and laughed. "You noticed." "I always noticed." She looked out at the water, her breath visible in the cold air. "That's what I need to tell you. The real truth I've been circling around for months." I waited, holding the coffee, holding my breath. All this time, while I was consumed with envy and inadequacy, while I was writing those blog posts and drowning in resentment, there was something I couldn't admit. Something that made everything else worse, because it contradicted all the anger I was feeling. She turned to face me, and her eyes were clear, finally unburdened. "The truth is, Natasha, through everything, through all the pain and jealousy and fear, I was never not proud of you. Never. Not for a single second." The words landed softly, but they hit with the force of revelation. Even when I was at my worst, even when I was writing those bitter blog posts about being left behind, there was this other voice underneath, this quieter voice that kept saying, "Look at her. Look at what she built. Look at how brave she was." Caroline's voice trembled. "I watched you risk everything. I watched you work until you were exhausted, until you doubted yourself, until you wanted to quit. I saw every moment of that 7-year struggle. And when you succeeded, when that moment finally came, I felt this explosion of joy and pride so intense it terrified me." She wiped at her eyes. "Because how could I be proud of you and jealous of you at the same time? How could I celebrate your success and resent it? It felt like I was being torn in two. So I focused on the resentment because at least that was simple. At least that didn't require me to hold 2 contradictory truths at once. I felt tears streaming down my face, but I didn't speak. This was her moment, her truth, and it deserved to be witnessed completely. "The thing I really thought about you through all of this," Caroline continued, "is that you're extraordinary. You're brilliant and determined and brave in ways I've spent my whole life wishing I could be. You saw something you wanted and you went after it with everything you had, and you didn't let fear stop you, even when it should have been terrifying." She took my hand. "And the reason I couldn't tell you this, the reason I buried it under layers of bitterness and pain, is because admitting you were extraordinary meant admitting I wasn't. Meant facing the fact that I'd been playing small my whole life while you were playing for keeps. Your courage highlighted my cowardice, and I couldn't bear it. You're not a coward, I said, my voice breaking. I was, but I'm trying not to be anymore. She smiled. And here's what I finally understand. Being proud of you and wanting more for myself aren't contradictory. Your success doesn't diminish mine. Your light doesn't make me dark. There's room for both of us to shine. She squeezed my hand. So that's the truth I've been too ashamed and too scared to say. I think you're amazing, Natasha. I always have. Even when I was drowning in envy. Even when I was pushing you away. Even when I was so angry I could barely breathe. Underneath all of that, I was in awe of you. I still am. The tears were flowing freely now, for both of us. Caroline. And I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. I'm sorry I let my insecurity turn something beautiful, my admiration for my best friend, into something ugly. You deserved to hear how proud I was of you. You deserved celebration without caveat, joy without resentment. And I robbed you of that because I was too broken to give it. I pulled her into a hug, and we sat there on that frozen bench, crying and laughing and holding each other as the sun climbed higher over the pond. All the months of silence and pain and careful distance had led to this moment. Not back to who we were, but forward into who we could be. I'm proud of you too, I whispered into her hair. Not for being my friend, not for anything to do with me. Just for who you are, for your writing, your art, your courage to fall apart and rebuild yourself, for being honest even when it hurt, for choosing growth over comfort. She pulled back, and her smile was radiant. We're going to be different now, aren't we? Yes. Better different. Equal different. Always equal, I said. We always were. I just forgot to show it and you forgot to believe it. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking our cheap coffee as the park came to life around us. Joggers passing by, dogs chasing each other, the ordinary, beautiful chaos of people living their lives. I thought about my penthouse across the city, all that empty elegance, and realized what it had been missing. Not furniture or art or expensive things. Just this. Honest connection, real friendship, the kind of love that survives truth-telling. I'm rewriting the chapter about you, Caroline said suddenly, in the book. I want to include this conversation, the real one. Not the version where you're the villain in my victim story, but the truth, that you were always rooting for me, even when I couldn't root for myself. Are you sure? I'm sure. Because the story isn't about you stealing my light. It's about me learning to turn mine on. She paused. But I wanted your permission to write about us, about this, about the real journey. You have it, all of it. I smiled. Just promise me one thing. What? That you'll tell the whole truth. The messy parts, the ugly parts, the parts that don't make either of us look good. Because that's what makes it real. That's what makes it matter. Deal. She held out her hand, and we shook on it, formal and ridiculous and perfect. 6 months later, I was back in my penthouse, but it looked different now. There were photos on the walls, real ones, of people I loved, moments that mattered. The dining table had hosted dinners, messy and loud and full of laughter. The guest rooms had actual guests. I'd learned to live in my wealth instead of being lived by it, to use my resources to create connection instead of distance. Caroline's book was sitting on my coffee table, early galley copy, her author photo on the back showing her smiling with paint-stained fingers. The dedication read, "For Natasha, who taught me that success isn't a zero-sum game, and that true friendship survives truth. We met for coffee every Sunday now, sometimes at fancy places, sometimes at the corner bodega, taking turns choosing because that's what equals do. We talked about her book tour, my company's expansion, her new relationship, my tentative steps back into dating. We talked about her life and mine with equal weight, equal interest, equal space. And sometimes we didn't talk at all. We just sat together on our bench by the pond, watching the water and the sky and the city moving around us. Two women who'd fought their way back to each other through honesty and hurt, and the courage to keep choosing connection. After I became a millionaire, I learned that wealth could buy almost anything, except the one thing that mattered most. It couldn't buy friendship. It couldn't buy trust. It couldn't buy the kind of love that looks at you at your worst and chooses to stay anyway, to tell you the truth, to believe you're worth the work of rebuilding. That, I'd learned, you could only earn. And once you had it, once you'd fought for it and nearly lost it and found it again, that was the kind of richness money could never touch. Caroline texted me as I sat there with her book in my hands. Heading to your place. Bringing wine and Chinese takeout. The cheap kind. Be there in 20. I smiled and texted back. Perfect. I'll leave the door unlocked, because that's what we did now. We left doors unlocked. We showed up without warning. We chose each other, again and again, in all the small ways that built a life. And that, more than any number in any bank account, made me feel like the richest woman in the world. If this story touched you, leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments, and subscribe for the next journey into the hearts of women who have everything, except what matters most.